Acts chapter 27, verses 1 to 12. Pretty much a geography lesson in this section. We last saw Paul making a defense in front of Festus, the governor, and King Agrippa and his sister Bernice. And they all thought he was guilty, but yet he chose to be in front of Caesar for judgment, so they're sending him to Caesar in Rome. It begins in verse 1. Os the ekrithi to apoplein imas istin Italian. And when it was decided for us to sail away unto Italy. Many nautical terms in this section here, plus the next few sections, because it's all tied into the boats that Paul goes on to go to Rome. So they decided to sail into Italy. They were in Caesarea, if you remember, where they had the trial. And it continues, paradidhun ton te pavlon, ke tinas eterus desmotas ekatantarchi, anomati iuliu. And they delivered up both Paul and certain other prisoners to a centurion by name Iulio, Julius, and the King James, that's what they called him. Another centurion who shows himself to be a gentleman, good person towards Paul and his friends, as most of the other centurions did very well with being introduced to Christ and the people that were called Christians. And as I mentioned, the centurions were the beginning of the church that was not Jewish, and it started in the Roman garrison of Legio, just east of the Lake of Galilee, and I've went through that in the past, all about that. In verse 2, Epivantes they plio adramitino, and having set foot in a boat of Adriantum. It's a port city in today's western Turkey. Melontes plin tus kata tin asian topus, being about to sail along the places along Asia, which is Turkey today, Anikthimen, we embarked. Onto sin imin Aristarchou Macedonos Thessalonikeos, and with Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, being with us. We've went through Aristarchus earlier. He was attached to Paul in Thessalonica when Paul went into Greece, and then he was with Paul and Gaius in the riots in Ephesus, gone with Demetrius the silversmith. It's mentioned that he was a Jew in Colossians 4:11, and the book of Philemon mentions sending a greeting to Philemon. That's in Philemon 24. Verse 3, Te de etera katichthimen is Sidona. And in the other day we led down unto Sidon. We'll go to our map here. We'll see that they were in Caesarea down here, and they went up to Sidon now. And then it says going under Cyprus, Myra, he'll mention that. Then it goes to Cnidus, which is Turkey today, and then down to Crete, Salome, Fair Havens, and then later over to Italy, which we will go into in another chapter. It continues, Philanthropos te, philanthropy, it's a derivative from that. O Iulios to Pavlo Chrysomenos, and Julius kindly, having treated Paul, epitrepsi pros tus filus porevthenta, Epimelias Tikin, permitted him, having gone to his friends to attain care. Kakethan anakthentas epiplevsamen tin Kipron, and from there, having embarked, we sailed under Cyprus, under sort of a nautical term where you're in between two places that the wind in the ocean isn't as strong as if you're out in the middle of the ocean. So you're under I think it's called leeward safety somewhat. And it says, Dia to tus animu ene enatius, because of the winds being adverse. I don't believe they stopped in Cyprus. It doesn't mention it anyway. So they are now heading along the southern coast of what's today Turkey. In verse 5, Tote Pelagos, the open sea, to kata tin Kilikia, ke Pamphilion, the Plevsantes, and the open sea along Cilicia and Pamphylia, having sailed, so apparently now they're in a more open area, more winds. Katil Themen is Mira tis Lykias. We went down into Myra of Lycia. We showed that on the map. And Cilicia and Pamphylia, right here, are provinces, Roman provinces, that are in southern Turkey today. Myra was a city on the southern coast of Turkey. In verse 6, Kaki, and there, Evron o Ekatontarkos, Plion Alexandrinon, Plion Eastin Italian, and there, the centurion, having found a boat of Alexandria, that is in Egypt, from there, sailing to Italy. So now, apparently this was at Myra, where they picked up this boat, Myra of Lycia. And it continues, and Aviva sen imas is avto, and he boarded us onto it. These boats had hundreds of people, 200 or 300 people could fit on these boats. And so he's boarding these prisoners and Paul on the boat, I'm sure under guard. Verse 7, in ikanes the imeres vradilountes, and in a fit amount of days, sailing slowly. I know all about that because I had a sailboat for many years in Southern California. And when I first bought it, I was probably in my early 20s. And I didn't have money for a motor. So I had to learn how to sail. It was a 25-foot boat, nothing real big, but it slept 4 people down below. Had a head, which is called it's a toilet, another word, nautical word for a toilet, and a little galley. Kitchen, and we used to go to Catalina, and I would sail all the way over there without a motor. I knew how to sail, but the winds weren't blowing. You weren't going anywhere, just pretty much sitting there, and sometimes they were just lightly blowing. You were moving along, but at a very slow pace, as we see right here. Ke molis genomene kata tin kenidon, and hardly having come to pass near Kenidos, Senidos, me proseontos imas to Anamu, the wind not allowing us further, Ipaplevsamen tin Cretin, we sailed under Crete. Now here's a picture of Senidos. Isn't it beautiful? The Mediterranean. And this is where he was. Then Senidos was a Hellenic city of high antiquity. You can read all about it in Wikipedia. Then they came unto Crete near Salmone. Now here's a picture of Crete and Salmone, Cape Salmone. So someplace in here, and then they sail over to where Fair Havens is, or good harbors, Cali Limenes. Verse 8, Molis te paralegomeni avtin, and hardly sailing along yet, so there weren't much wind. Il thumen is topon tina kalumenon. We came into a certain place being called Kalus Limanus, good harbors. Fair Havens is another. I think the King James calls it Fair Havens, but I translating it literally, Kalus Limanus. O Agis in Polis Lasaea, which was near a city of Lycia. Right now, the Fair Havens has a population of all of 17 inhabitants. Verse 9, Ikanude chronu, the agenomenu, then a fit amount of time having elapsed, ke ontos, and being the already, episphalu, to plus, being a dangerous voyage, via toke tin nestion idi parallelithene. Also the fasting already went by. Parini o Pavlos, Paul earnestly advised. Now, what it's talking about here, I looked it up, and fasting is the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur. It generally falls in September or October, and this is when the storms begin brewing in the eastern Mediterranean where they were. So Paul earnestly advised Legon, saying to them, Avtis, Andros, men, Theoro oti meta evreos ke polis zemias. I contemplate that with damage and much loss, umonon tu fortio ke tu pliu, not only of the load of cargo and of the boat, Allah ke ton psychonimon, melin esesthe ton plon. But also the voyage is about to be of our lives. In verse 11, Ode ekatontarkis to kivernisi ke to navkliro apithato. But the centurion was persuaded by the navigator and the shipmaster. Malon e tis ipotu Pavlu legomenos, rather than the things being said by Paul. So they are not going to listen to the navigator of the boat, the shipmaster, the owner, I suppose, of this boat, and are like a captain of the ship, and the navigator is the person that guides the ship. And neither one of them wanted to do what Paul wanted to do. They wanted to continue on. It sort of happened to me once in that boat when I was in Catalina, and I wanted to get back to the mainland, which was east of Catalina from Avalon. And I went to the harbor master and asked him about it. He said, oh, it shouldn't be any problem. Well, we got about halfway there, and the Santa Ana winds came up, one of the strongest ever, and in the 21-foot boat, and the waves were like this, and the boat was like that big, and it would go up the wave, and then I'd pull a tiller, make the rudder go, and instead of slamming over the top of the wave and crashing, it would get up to the top, and then it would turn sideways and slide down and go into the trough, doing this for hours. Scared to death, threw out a sea anchor of a 6-pack of beer on about a 50-foot line, which would keep the stern of the boat by the waves always towards the waves rather than broaching it on the side, which could tip it over. And so they, persuaded by the dock master that it was going to be okay, was sort of reminds me of this when I see this part of the Bible with my experiences. In verse 12, Anevthatu say to Limenos eparkontos pros parahemasion, and the existing harbor being unsuitable, pros parahemasion, for wintering, Eplios ethentos vulin anakthene kakethan. The more they made counsel to embark from there. So apparently this side of the island was where the weather was coming in, pushing the water and everything towards the land. And a ship without a motor, which these all were, of course, your biggest enemy is land, getting close to land and crashing ashore. So you want to stay away from it, and you have to sail these boats or probably row. So you don't want to make a mistake. You want to do the safest thing. And so apparently these navigator and the ship's master decided to go for it, to get out of that harbor. Epos deinento, if by any means they might be able. So to getting out of the harbor, you had to sail out, and if the wind's coming down towards you, then you can't go straight into the wind with a sailboat. You can go 45 degrees, the wind's coming this way, then you can go, it's called tacking, you can go that way and you go back and forth to go forward, and that's how you sail. Now, I don't know, it's tacking in the modern sailboat, you had a jib in the front and then sails that were pulled in tight, and it was made to do that. And it was, I don't know about these boats here. It continues, katan tesantes es Phoenica, and having arrived at Phoenix, parakhimase, to pass the winter, limena tis Kritis, which is a harbor of Crete, vleponta kata leva ke kata horon, looking towards the southwest and the northwest. I'll go back to this map of Crete. So the northwest winds would not harm them. They were saved from damage with the northwestern wind here if they're in this Fair Havens. But we'll go into the next section, Euroclydon, in the northeast wind, stronger, like the Santa Ana winds in California. It came down right where they were and pushed them towards the island of Claudible. So we'll go into the wind from the north, it's called the Euroclydon, in the next section.